It was 1976 when humanity first glimpsed something extraordinary on the red planet. Through the lens of NASA's Viking 1 orbiter, a strange, shadowed shape emerged from the Martian dust, a shape that looked eerily like a human face staring straight back at Earth. Beside it, faint, triangular patterns hinted at geometry too deliberate to ignore. For a brief, unforgettable moment, the scientific world held its breath. The image was transmitted back to Earth pixel by pixel in ghostly monochrome. Technicians in the NASA control room leaned closer to their monitors, unsure of what they were seeing. Was this just the angle of light, or something far beyond explanation? Within hours, the face on Mars escaped the lab and ignited imaginations around the world. The line between science and mystery had blurred. The region captured in that photograph was called Cydonia Mensae, a rugged boundary between the northern plains and the highlands of Mars. But for some, it resembled not mere geology, but the ruins of a lost civilization. Suddenly, the lifeless planet seemed alive with ancient secrets, whispering through time from beneath its crimson surface. As the image spread through newspapers and TV screens, theories multiplied faster than NASA could respond. Astronomers urged caution, insisting the resemblance was a coincidence. Yet, to millions of eyes, the details were undeniable: a clear nose, eyes, even a mouth, all aligned with eerie precision. Who built it? People began to ask. And why? Amateur astronomers soon noticed other shapes near the face. Pyramidal hills arranged in curious alignment. The patterns were too symmetrical, too deliberate. Could these be remnants of a Martian city? Was this perhaps an ancient outpost long forgotten? The whispers of cosmic archaeology began to echo louder. For centuries, Mars had fascinated humankind as a symbol of war, mystery, and rebirth. But now that fascination took physical form. A silent monument gazed upward from a planet that might once have been alive. The boundaries between myth, science, and possibility had dissolved into red dust and starlight. Scientists rushed to analyze the terrain using geological models. But the public saw something more, a message across time and space. Talk shows, magazines, and science fiction authors all embraced the enigma. The face on Mars wasn't just an image, it was a mirror reflecting our longing for connection in the cosmos. Every great mystery needs a face, and now Mars had one. It became an icon, a symbol of humanity's endless curiosity and fear of cosmic loneliness. Was it evidence of something larger than ourselves, or merely the universe playing tricks with light and shadow? The question was left deliberately unanswered. For NASA, the photograph became both an opportunity and a burden. Scientists emphasized skepticism, but mystery feeds itself. The more they denied it, the more people believed. Curiosity burned hotter than reason. The face was no longer a formation, it was a story that refused to fade. What began as a simple orbital image had become a reflection of humanity's deepest desires and doubts. Was it an illusion, or proof that we were never alone? Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. Something on Mars was watching, and we were watching it back. The discovery in Cydonia. To understand the myth of the Martian pyramids, we must return to that exact moment in 1976. The Viking 1 spacecraft orbited high above the red sands, capturing images to study Mars' surface and search for traces of life. Among thousands of photographs, one frame stood out, an uncanny face carved by time or intention. Its caption read almost casually, "A rock formation resembling a human head." But for those who saw it, it was anything but casual. Scientists noted the coordinates carefully and began to examine the region. Cydonia Mensae, a mysterious boundary filled with mazes and plateaus sculpted by erosion. But one mesa stood apart. Its symmetry, its shadows, and its outline all seemed strangely intentional. It was as if nature itself had conspired to leave behind a portrait. NASA's official explanation came quickly. It's just a trick of light and shadow. The statement made sense. When sunlight strikes terrain at a low angle, it can create illusions, faces, shapes, even pyramids. Yet even within NASA, some admitted the resemblance was unsettling. The formation was strangely compelling, one engineer later confessed. Within days, the image leapt from scientific papers to front-page headlines. "Face found on Mars," the newspapers cried. Television hosts speculated about ancient aliens, and conspiracy theorists found new fuel for their imaginations. The discovery had broken free from the confines of data and entered the realm of human myth. Cydonia had become legend. The Viking mission's original purpose was to analyze Martian soil and weather, not to capture cosmic mysteries. But all those objectives were overshadowed by a single photograph. For the first time, ordinary people were gazing at Mars and wondering, had life once existed there? The universe suddenly felt smaller and infinitely more mysterious. Scientists urged the public to stay rational. They explained Pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar patterns, especially faces, in random shapes. It was a logical explanation, yet logic rarely competes with wonder. Millions chose to believe the face was real, a message from another time or another species. Independent researchers began charting the surrounding terrain. To their amazement, several nearby formations appeared to follow geometric patterns. Triangles, pentagons, even lines suggesting mathematical alignment. Were these coincidences or the remnants of a long-lost Martian architecture? Each discovery deepened the intrigue. For every skeptic claiming coincidence, there was a dreamer insisting otherwise. Theories bloomed, some poetic, some bizarre. Perhaps Mars once thrived with life that built cities of stone. Perhaps they left, and we are their descendants. Or perhaps, as some dared to believe, they were watching still. The face of Cydonia transformed from a mere image into a cultural phenomenon. It appeared in movies, novels, and countless debates about extraterrestrial life. The human imagination had colonized Mars long before our machines ever did, and in that sense the face was more than a mystery. It was a reflection of ourselves. Even now, decades later, Cydonia remains a symbol of our cosmic curiosity. Whether carved by erosion or intention, it stands as a reminder that exploration is not just about discovery. It's about the questions we dare to ask. And sometimes the most haunting mysteries are the ones that look back at us, the face and the surrounding formations. As attention on the Martian face grew, researchers began studying the entire region of Cydonia in greater detail. What they found only deepened the mystery. Around the face, several peculiar landforms appeared to align in deliberate patterns. Triangular hills, domes, and ridges arranged as though part of a forgotten city plan. These weren't random mounds of rock, some argued, but structures carefully placed by an unknown intelligence. Maps of the region began circulating among amateur astronomers and ufologists alike. When connected by imaginary lines, the formations seemed to create geometric relationships, equal distances, parallel alignments, and even right angles. To believers, it was clear this wasn't nature's chaos, it was design. The question was, designed by whom? Photographs of Cydonia took on a new weight. The face was no longer an isolated curiosity. It was the centerpiece of something larger. Researchers labeled neighboring formations with evocative names like the city, the fort, and the pyramid complex. In grainy black and white images, they appeared ancient and worn. like relics of a long-lost Martian civilization buried under eons of dust. The symmetry was mesmerizing. Some formations formed perfect equilateral triangles when plotted on a map. Others mirrored the layout of Earth's own pyramids. The most striking was the so-called D&M pyramid, a five-sided structure that, when analyzed, appeared to encode mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio. Could coincidence truly account for such precision? For those who dared to believe, these alignments were evidence of an intelligent past on Mars. The formations seemed too ordered, too precise, to have been shaped solely by wind and erosion. Every shadow, every line of symmetry seemed to whisper of forgotten hands and vanished builders. And yet, mainstream science remained unconvinced. Skeptics pointed out that erosion and natural geological processes can create shapes that mimic architecture. They reminded the public that the human brain is wired to see meaning, even where none exists. But even as they spoke, the images continued to haunt the collective imagination. What if those explanations were wrong? What if the truth was simply beyond our understanding? As computers improved, analysts enhanced the Viking images, sharpening contrast and reducing noise. Instead of silencing the mystery, the enhancements made it stronger. The formations now looked sharper, the alignments clearer, and the face more defined. The illusion, if it was one, had grown more convincing. Public fascination reached fever pitch. Books, documentaries, and scientific debates turned Cydonia into a cultural obsession. To some, it was proof that humanity was not the first intelligent life in the solar system. To others, it was a mirror of our deepest desire, to find meaning in the vast emptiness of space. Either way, Cydonia had become sacred ground in the mythology of exploration. Every mystery breeds believers and skeptics alike, but the face on Mars stood at a unique intersection between both. Scientists couldn't fully explain why the formations looked so deliberate, and believers couldn't prove they weren't natural. Between them, a new kind of mystery emerged, one not just about Mars, but about how humans perceive the unknown. And so, the pyramids of Mars remained silent, untouched, unvisited, and unsolved. Whether carved by nature or by something far older, they continued to stare skyward, holding secrets only time or another mission might one day reveal. The theory of artificial symmetry. The idea that the formations in Cydonia might be artificial wasn't born out of fantasy. It came from mathematics. Researchers noticed that many of the so-called pyramids shared consistent ratios and angles. When plotted, their distances and alignments followed geometric relationships found in human architecture. To some scientists, that pattern was deeply unsettling. Nature, after all, rarely builds in straight lines. Richard C. Hoagland, a former NASA consultant, became one of the most vocal advocates for the artificiality hypothesis. He argued that the face and its neighboring structures were deliberately constructed by an ancient civilization, possibly millions of years old. His claim wasn't based on mythology, but on mathematics, proportion, and symmetry. The universe, he said, doesn't create geometry by accident. Hoagland's analysis suggested that the D&M pyramid encoded complex mathematical ratios, pi, e, and even references to tetrahedral geometry. These weren't just numbers, they represented universal constants that implied intention. If true, it would mean that the builders understood advanced mathematics long before humanity ever looked to the stars. Skeptics countered with geology. They explained how wind erosion, tectonic activity, and dust accumulation could naturally create symmetrical shapes over millions of years. Randomness, they argued, occasionally produces order. But the believers pointed to the improbability of such precision. Could randomness truly sculpt five-sided pyramids in near-perfect alignment? To many, the argument wasn't just scientific, it was philosophical. If Mars once hosted intelligent life, it would change everything we know about our place in the cosmos. The symmetry of Cydonia then became a metaphor for the symmetry of existence itself, a pattern hidden in the chaos of the universe. Scientists from universities around the world joined the debate. Some used 3D modeling to recreate the terrain, proving that shadows and sunlight could indeed produce illusions. Others remained intrigued by the mathematical consistencies that persisted even after correcting for distortion. No one could quite close the case. As new satellite missions were planned, the hope was to capture clearer images that would settle the question once and for all. But hope, like mystery, has its own gravity. Even before new data arrived, the legend had already taken on a life of its own. The symmetry wasn't just mathematical act, and it was psychological. It reflected humanity's desire for connection, meaning, and proof that we're not alone. The theory of artificial symmetry became a bridge between science and imagination. It challenged both sides to look deeper, not only at the surface of Mars, but into the nature of discovery itself. Whether carved by erosion or intelligence, those perfect lines told a story larger than themselves, the story of humanity's unending search for order in a universe that thrives on mystery. And perhaps that is why the pyramids of Mars continue to captivate us. Not because they prove life beyond Earth, but because they reveal the most human truth of all, that we are creatures of pattern, forever seeking faces in the stars. The NASA studies. While public fascination soared, NASA quietly began conducting more in-depth analyses of the Viking images. Teams of geologists, planetary scientists, and imaging specialists revisited every pixel of the Cydonia photographs. Their goal was not to uncover alien ruins, but to understand what natural forces could sculpt such uncanny formations. The agency wanted to ground the conversation back in science, but the mystery had already taken flight. Using topographic data, NASA's analysts calculated the height, width, and slope of the face and surrounding structures. The results suggested that the formations were mesas, flat-topped hills carved by erosion, much like those found in the deserts of Arizona or Utah. To them, this was evidence of nature's artistry, not intelligence. But to others, the precision still defied randomness. Reports published in the years following the Viking mission emphasized geological explanations. The official line remained consistent. Lighting angles and low image resolution created the illusion of a face. Yet the wording of those reports, illusion, appearance, resemblance, left just enough room for the imagination to slip through. For every explanation, a new question emerged. NASA's primary challenge wasn't just scientific, it was psychological. Once the public had seen a face, no amount of data could unsee it. Human perception, they realized, is not easily persuaded by numbers. Even within the agency, a few whispered that Cydonia was strangely suggestive, though they'd never say so on record. As technology advanced, NASA sought to capture clearer, higher resolution images to put the debate to rest. But paradoxically, the promise of better photos only amplified public curiosity. People around the world waited eagerly for the next probe to pass over the enigmatic region, wondering whether the new images would confirm the myth or destroy it. When the Mars Global Surveyor finally returned fresh images decades later, the result was anticlimactic for some, but illuminating for others. The face now appeared flatter, more natural, stripped of its human features. The lighting had changed, and so had the narrative. NASA declared the case closed, but the public? They weren't ready to let go. For many, the new photos looked like a cover-up. The difference between the 1976 image and the modern one was too extreme. Were the shadows merely different, or had something been altered? theories began circulating that NASA had intentionally manipulated the lighting or even destroyed the site with laser strikes. Official denials only deepened suspicion. In reality, NASA's interest in Cydonia had never been about proving alien life. It was about understanding erosion, weathering, and planetary geology. Yet the agency underestimated how deeply the mystery had embedded itself into popular culture. The more data they published, the more emotional the debate became. The face on Mars had transcended science. It had become legend. For NASA, Cydonia became a lesson in communication. Facts alone couldn't silence fascination. Humans don't just crave truth, they crave wonder. And when wonder meets skepticism, mystery is the only survivor. The agency had provided answers, but the world still preferred the question. In the end, NASA's studies revealed as much about us as about Mars itself. We see patterns because we long for meaning. We search the stars because we hope to find ourselves reflected there. Whether the formations were mere mesas or ancient monuments, one thing was certain. The human need to believe had proven stronger than any scientific explanation. The public and media reaction. The moment NASA released the first image of the face on Mars, the story escaped the boundaries of science. Newspapers splashed it across front pages, television anchors speculated breathlessly, and talk shows filled airtime with the tantalizing possibility of alien life. For the first time, Mars wasn't just a distant planet, it was front-page drama, a cosmic riddle for the entire world to solve. In the 1970s and 80s, this was the perfect storm for fascination. Humanity had just witnessed the moon landings and was hungry for the next great discovery. When the Viking image surfaced, it felt like the continuation of that story. Proof that our reach for the stars might uncover something even greater. Company. The idea that Mars might once have been inhabited electrified imaginations everywhere. Pop culture responded instantly. Magazines like Time and National Enquirer ran contrasting stories, one rational, one sensational. Movies, novels, and comic books began weaving Cydonia into their plots. The face on Mars became a symbol of forbidden knowledge, the image of a silent watcher buried beneath alien sands. Even those who dismissed it couldn't escape its allure. Radio hosts debated whether NASA was hiding the truth. Conspiracy theorists claimed the agency had already found evidence of life and covered it up to prevent panic. Television documentaries used eerie music and grainy zoom-ins to dramatize the face, turning it into a cultural phenomenon. The debate wasn't just about science anymore, it was about trust, belief, and power. As more people saw the image, more began to interpret it through their own lenses. Spiritual, mystical, or scientific. Some said the face represented the gods of old, remnants of a cosmic connection between Earth and Mars. Others believed it was a monument left by our ancestors, a reminder of where humanity truly came from. The line between myth and reality had blurred beyond recognition. NASA tried repeatedly to temper the hype, releasing technical statements and geological reports. But logic rarely competes with imagination. The more the agency explained, the more the mystery expanded. Each denial was read as confirmation, each new photo a clue in a larger conspiracy. The face on Mars had taken on a life of its own, a story that no longer belonged to science. For journalists, Cydonia was gold. It was a story that balanced perfectly between skepticism and awe, a story that sold newspapers, inspired debates, and touched something primal in every reader. We all wanted to believe. We all wanted to imagine that we weren't alone, and perhaps deep down we feared that the truth might be too ordinary to satisfy that longing. The 1980s saw the rise of documentaries, most famously those narrated by Carl Sagan, who both debunked and admired the mystery. Sagan himself called the face a fascinating illusion. yet admitted that the human tendency to find patterns in chaos was itself profoundly human. Even the skeptics, it seemed, were enchanted by the story. By the end of the decade, the face on Mars had cemented its place in cultural history. It wasn't just an image anymore. It was an idea. A reminder that sometimes the things we discover in the stars say more about us than about the cosmos itself. Mars had given us a mirror, and in it we saw both our wonder and our obsession. Even today, when clearer images have demystified the face, its legend endures. The fascination remains not because it proves life on Mars, but because it proves the unshakable power of curiosity. The face never blinked, but it made us look, not just at Mars, but at ourselves. The arrival of new probes. Decades after the Viking missions, the mystery of Cydonia still lingered, unresolved, unforgotten. Technology had advanced, and NASA was determined to revisit the region with far greater clarity. The launch of new orbiters, including the Mars Global Surveyor in the late 1990s and later the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, promised to reveal the truth behind the myth that had captured the world's imagination. The surveyor's cameras were equipped with powerful lenses capable of imaging the Martian surface in far higher resolution than Viking ever could. Scientists eagerly awaited the probe's arrival over Cydonia. For the first time, humanity would see the face on Mars not as a grainy blur, but as it truly was. Was it an ancient monument, or merely a geological illusion born of shadow and chance? As the first high-definition images returned to Earth, the tension was palpable. Decades of speculation, belief, and debate were about to meet the clarity of science. When the photo finally appeared on NASA's monitors, it told a very different story. The face was gone, or rather, it had never been there. The illusion of symmetry vanished under the sharp light of truth. The once human features dissolved into ridges, valleys, and scattered rock. NASA released the images to the public almost immediately, along with a confident statement: there is no face. It's a natural mesa, sculpted by millions of years of wind and erosion. The agency hoped this would end the debate once and for all, but instead the reaction only deepened the intrigue. The new images didn't silence curiosity, they fueled it. To believers, the new photographs were suspiciously different. The lighting, the angle, even the contrast seemed altered, as if the agency had gone out of its way to disprove the mystery. Conspiracy theorists argued that the original formations had been tampered with, destroyed, or digitally erased. The truth, they said, had once again been hidden from humanity. Meanwhile, NASA scientists struggled to understand the persistence of the legend. To them, the new data was clear. Cydonia was a landscape shaped by ancient Martian weather patterns, not intelligence. But mystery, once born, has a way of surviving even in the face of evidence. The public wasn't just looking for facts, they were looking for meaning. The arrival of new probes marked a turning point in our relationship with Mars. For the first time, high-resolution imaging allowed scientists to map the planet with incredible detail. And yet, instead of ending the mystery, these new missions revealed a deeper truth: that humanity's greatest discoveries are not always physical. Sometimes they are emotional, symbolic, and profoundly existential. The face on Mars became a metaphor for exploration itself. Each new probe reminded us that science and imagination are not enemies, but partners in our search for understanding. Even when the data dismissed the illusion, the story endured, because it spoke to something eternal within us. The need to believe that the universe still holds secrets. As NASA prepared for future missions, including landers and rovers, Cydonia faded from official headlines. But its shadow lingered, a silent reminder that sometimes the greatest discoveries are not the ones we prove, but the ones we continue to chase. The probes had delivered the truth. The people, however, preferred the mystery. The differences between original and recent images. When the new high-resolution images of Cydonia were released, the contrast with the original 1976 photos was startling. Gone were the deep shadows that once shaped the haunting visage of a humanoid face. In their place stood a rugged mesa, pocked with craters and irregular slopes. Under different lighting, the illusion dissolved completely. What had once seemed sculpted by intelligence now looked shaped by time. NASA's official explanation was simple. The Viking images had been captured during early morning on Mars, when sunlight cast long, dramatic shadows across the terrain. These shadows exaggerated depth and contrast, creating the illusion of eyes, a nose, and a mouth. The newer probes, however, took their photographs when the sun was higher in the Martian sky, flattening those shadows and revealing the mesa's true form. But even that explanation failed to satisfy everyone. To believers, the differences were too extreme. Some claimed the newer images were intentionally overexposed or blurred, designed to obscure the original structure. Others went further, suggesting that NASA had destroyed the formation using laser weaponry or explosives. In the public imagination, every detail became potential evidence of a cover-up. Scientists grew frustrated. They demonstrated the lighting conditions, recreated the angles, and even used 3D models to show how the face could appear and disappear depending on perspective. To them, it was a perfect case study in Pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar patterns in randomness, but they underestimated how deeply the original image had imprinted itself on the world's collective memory. For millions who had grown up with the myth, the new pictures didn't just erase a face on Mars, they erased a piece of wonder. The disappointment was palpable. The image that had once united dreamers, scientists, and storytellers now felt like a curtain pulled back too far. Some accepted the scientific explanation, others clung to belief. But both sides felt a strange sense of loss. Journalists compared the two images side by side in newspapers and documentaries. In the old one, mystery lived in the shadows. In the new, those shadows were gone, replaced by sterile detail. Science killed the magic, some wrote, while others argued that the new clarity only deepened our appreciation for how easily the universe can deceive us. The comparison between old and new also highlighted something profound. That truth in science and in life depends on perspective. Under one light, a hill becomes a face. Under another, a face becomes a hill. Our perception of reality is fragile, easily shaped by what we want to see. Cydonia, in that sense, became more than a Martian landscape. It became a psychological mirror. In classrooms and documentaries, scientists began using the face on Mars as an example of critical thinking. But for artists, writers, and dreamers, it remained something sacred, a symbol of mystery's endurance in an age of certainty. Even when the shadows disappeared, the story they cast refused to fade. By the time newer missions like Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter sent back ultra-clear images of Cydonia, most of the scientific community had moved on. Yet online forums, books, and late-night radio shows kept the legend alive. The face, once erased by sunlight, continued to exist in the darker corners of imagination, where curiosity, not clarity, reigns supreme. In the end, the difference between the old and new images revealed more about humanity than about Mars itself. Science had illuminated the surface, but belief had illuminated the soul. Between the truth and the myth, we found something even more powerful. The reminder that wonder, once awakened, can never truly be erased. The role of optical illusions. Pareidolia. Human perception is a wondrous and deeply deceptive thing. Our brains are wired to seek patterns in the chaos around us, to find familiarity in the unfamiliar. It's a survival instinct written into our DNA. The reason we see faces in clouds, animals in rock formations, and shapes in the stars. Scientists call it Pareidolia, and it lies at the very heart of the face on Mars phenomenon. The Martian landscape, shaped by billions of years of erosion, is full of ridges, shadows, and slopes that can trick the human eye. When viewed from orbit and under specific lighting, those natural features can align in ways that mimic the symmetry of a human face. The mind, hungry for meaning, fills in the gaps. A nose here, an eye there, until chaos becomes design. To NASA scientists, Pareidolia was the simplest and most elegant explanation. They demonstrated how changes in sunlight could transform random topography into faces, animals, or even buildings. And yet, no amount of explanation could erase what millions had already seen. Once the illusion had taken hold, it was impossible to unsee. The face on Mars had become a psychological ghost living in the shared imagination of humanity. Examples of Pareidolia are everywhere. We see saints in toast, dragons in clouds, and eyes in the windows of old houses. Even on Earth, ancient people once carved mountains and cliffs believing they already contained the faces of gods. In that sense, Cydonia was just another reflection of that ancient impulse to find ourselves in the cosmos, to see the divine in the dust. Psychologists argue that Pareidolia reveals something profound about human nature. We are meaning makers, storytellers by design. When faced with the vast emptiness of space, our minds instinctively reach for connection. The face on Mars wasn't just a trick of light, it was a projection of longing, a mirror of humanity's need to feel less alone. But the scientific explanation, while convincing, lacked the poetry that the public craved. Pareidolia might explain the illusion, but it couldn't explain the fascination. If it was only a trick of perception, why did it stir such emotion? Why did people across the world feel drawn to a silent, distant mesa millions of miles away? The answer may lie in the intersection between logic and wonder. The face on Mars reminds us that science can reveal the mechanics of a mystery, but not always its meaning. We can understand why we see faces where there are none. But the fact that we want to see them tells an even deeper story about the human spirit. NASA's attempts to classify the phenomenon scientifically did little to extinguish its mythic power. The term Pareidolia became part of the public lexicon, but the fascination endured. In every shadow of Mars, dreamers continued to look for new faces, new patterns. Proof, perhaps, not of aliens, but of the enduring magic of perception itself. In the end, Pareidolia may not diminish the face on Mars. It may, in fact, elevate it. Because what could be more human than turning dust and light into meaning? Even if the face is an illusion, the wonder it inspired is real. And that, perhaps, is the truest reflection of all. The alternative theories. Despite NASA's explanations, the mystery of Cydonia refused to fade. For every scientist preaching geological logic, there were countless voices whispering of civilizations long gone, of secrets buried beneath the Martian sands. Alternative theories began to flourish, some bold, others bizarre, but all fueled by a shared conviction that Cydonia was no coincidence. One of the earliest and most persistent ideas was that Mars once hosted an advanced civilization, a species capable of architecture, art, and mathematics. According to this theory, the face and pyramids were monuments, perhaps dedicated to their gods or ancestors. When disaster struck, a cosmic cataclysm, a shifting orbit, a dying sun, their world was lost, leaving behind only ruins to whisper their existence. Others proposed an even stranger possibility, that Mars had once been colonized by visitors from elsewhere, perhaps from another star system. These cosmic builders, the theory went, constructed monuments as markers or messages, knowing they would be discovered one day. To believers, the face was not a monument of mourning, but a beacon, an interstellar "we were here." Some went further still, weaving a connection between Mars and Earth. Ancient astronaut theorists claimed that humanity itself might be descended from Martians, survivors who fled their dying planet and seeded life here. In that story, the face on Mars was not alien at all. It was our reflection, a reminder of our forgotten home. Writers and researchers like Richard Hoagland, Graham Hancock and Zecharia Sitchin became household names, blending scientific speculation with mythic narrative. Their books and documentaries reached millions, suggesting that our history, and the universe's, might be far older and stranger than we've been taught. Whether dismissed as pseudoscience or hailed as revelation, their work kept the mystery alive. NASA and mainstream scientists rejected these claims, pointing to the lack of physical evidence. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, they argued. But for many, the proof was already visible, carved into the red surface for all to see. To them, the refusal to investigate further seemed not scientific caution, but deliberate denial. As decades passed, the alternative theories evolved. Some merged with modern UFO lore, suggesting that Mars might still harbor hidden structures underground. Others speculated that NASA itself had discovered something it couldn't reveal, remnants of technology or inscriptions that would rewrite human history. The line between curiosity and conspiracy blurred completely. And yet, beneath the speculation, one truth remained constant: the need to believe. The idea that Mars once held life, intelligent, creative life, offered hope. It meant that consciousness wasn't unique to Earth, that civilizations could rise even in the most hostile corners of the universe. It meant that we were part of something greater. The face on Mars became a canvas for every cosmic hope and fear. Whether monument, illusion, or message, it symbolized the eternal tension between skepticism and faith. We long to know, and yet we cling to mystery. Perhaps that's why, even today, the theories persist. Not because they're proven, but because they give us something to wonder about. Maybe that's the real gift of Cydonia, not evidence of Martians, but evidence of ourselves. Our relentless imagination, our hunger for meaning, and our refusal to accept that the universe is indifferent. The face may not be real, but the longing behind it is, and that in its own way is just as extraordinary. The modern scientific view. As the decades passed and technology advanced, science began to paint a clearer, more grounded picture of Mars. With every new orbiter, lander, and rover, the myth of Cydonia was revisited under sharper light. And while the magic of the face on Mars persisted in popular imagination, the scientific consensus grew more certain. What we once thought was a monument was, and always had been, a mountain. Modern imaging from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter revealed the terrain of Cydonia in stunning clarity. The mesa, once mysterious, was now just one of thousands dotting the Martian landscape. Erosion, ancient flooding, and wind had sculpted it over billions of years. The symmetry that once suggested intelligence was an illusion born from shadow and distance. In the cold eye of science, the face had finally vanished. Yet, even as the data stripped away the fantasy, the fascination refused to die. Many scientists began to realize that the phenomenon said as much about humanity as it did about Mars. It was a perfect case study in the psychology of perception, how hope, fear, and imagination can shape the way we see the universe. The face on Mars wasn't just a geological formation. It was a mirror reflecting our longing for connection. Geologists studying Cydonia focused on the natural processes behind its creation. The region, they discovered, was geologically complex, a transitional zone between the Martian highlands and plains. Wind erosion, tectonic uplift, and ancient landslides had carved countless mesas and ridges across the area. The so-called face was simply one that happened by chance to resemble a human profile when viewed from orbit at a certain angle. Scientists emphasized that such coincidences are inevitable in a universe governed by randomness and repetition. Given enough rock formations, one will always appear meaningful, a shape that resonates with the human mind. Just as clouds can form dragons or hearts, Mars had formed a face. It wasn't a message from the cosmos, it was an accident interpreted as one. But not all scientists dismissed the fascination outright. Some saw in the public's obsession a beautiful form of curiosity, the kind that drives exploration itself. After all, it was wonder that led humanity to send probes across the void. The face inspired people to look at Mars, said one NASA researcher. And if that leads someone to study planetary science, maybe that's its real legacy. The modern scientific view thus evolved into something more nuanced. The face on Mars became both a cautionary tale and an inspiration, a reminder that the universe doesn't owe us meaning, but that we'll keep searching for it anyway. The image that once sparked controversy had now become a symbol of how science and imagination, even when in tension, are part of the same human story. Today, the face on Mars is featured in textbooks and documentaries, not as evidence of alien life, but as a lesson in critical thinking and perception. It stands as proof that even illusions can move the world. Science may have demystified the mesa, but it couldn't extinguish the wonder it created. In that sense, the face lives on, not in rock, but in memory. And perhaps that's what science, at its heart, truly is. Not the destruction of mystery, but its transformation. The unknown becomes understood, and the wonder begins anew. Similar discoveries on other worlds. As humanity's gaze expanded beyond Mars, new worlds offered new mysteries and new illusions. With every spacecraft sent deeper into the solar system, strange and familiar shapes emerged from the darkness. Once again, our pattern-seeking minds went to work, finding meaning in the unlikeliest of places. On Jupiter's icy moon, Europa, some claim to see the outlines of vast geometric patterns beneath the frozen crust, structures that resembled underwater cities. On Titan, Saturn's largest moon, radar scans revealed shapes eerily reminiscent of shorelines and towers. On Pluto, the New Horizons mission photographed a heart-shaped plane, instantly transforming the dwarf planet from a cold rock into a symbol of cosmic affection. Even on our own moon, strange shadows and ridges have inspired generations of speculation. The castle, the bridge, and the shard, mysterious lunar formations captured in early photographs, became the subjects of countless theories. Some insisted they were natural, others swore they were ruins, relics of something ancient and unearthly left in plain sight. Scientists welcomed these discoveries not as proof of alien life, but as evidence of how our minds interact with the unknown. Each illusion, each structure, was a testament to our need to find connection, to believe that the cosmos is not indifferent, but alive with intention. In a way, these visions reminded us that curiosity itself is our most powerful instrument. Pareidolia didn't stop at Mars or the Moon. When images of asteroid Eros were transmitted back to Earth, some saw carvings. When Venus was mapped by radar, people claimed to see faces and symbols etched in the clouds. Even on distant worlds bathed in methane and shadow, humanity couldn't resist projecting itself onto the void. Astrobiologists often point out that these moments of misinterpretation play an important role in discovery. They spark debate, attract attention, and often inspire deeper investigation. The face on Mars, the city on the Moon, and the heart of Pluto all share something in common. They remind us that wonder and science are not enemies. They coexist, feeding one another in an eternal cycle of curiosity. In the age of artificial intelligence and advanced imaging, scientists can now analyze planetary surfaces with incredible precision. Yet even with all our technology, the human element remains unchanged. We still look at distant worlds and see patterns, stories, faces, it ourselves. The cosmos may not be speaking to us directly, but through our interpretations it speaks nonetheless. And so every time a probe sends back a new image from some uncharted world, the same question echoes through the human mind. What if? What if one of these shapes isn't an illusion? What if, among the random lines and ridges, there truly lies the fingerprint of another intelligence? That question, that fragile thread of wonder, is what keeps us exploring. Whether we find life or not, the act of searching defines us. Each illusion, each misunderstanding, each spark of imagination brings us closer, not only to understanding the universe, but to understanding ourselves. Perhaps that's the real beauty of these cosmic mirages. They remind us that meaning is not always found. Sometimes it's created. Why Mars inspires theories of ancient civilizations. For centuries, Mars has been more than a planet. It has been a mirror reflecting humanity's fears, hopes, and cosmic ambitions. Long before the first spacecraft ever reached its orbit, Mars lived vividly in our collective imagination as a world of mystery and possibility. From ancient astronomers to modern scientists, the red planet has always seemed both familiar and alien, a twin to Earth, yet hauntingly empty. Early astronomers observed faint markings across Mars's surface through their telescopes. In the 19th century, Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli mapped what he called canali, channels he believed were evidence of water. When translated into English as canals, the term ignited a global frenzy. People imagined vast Martian irrigation systems, proof of intelligent life tending to a dying world. The myth of a living Mars was born. Writers like H.G. Wells with The War of the Worlds and Edgar Rice Burroughs with A Princess of Mars transformed scientific speculation into mythic storytelling. These tales painted Mars as a place of lost civilizations, ancient ruins, and advanced beings watching us from afar. By the time NASA's Viking mission sent back images in the 1970s, the human mind was already primed to see not rocks, but relics. The face on Mars arrived at the perfect moment in history, when our technology had caught up to our imagination. For centuries we had dreamed of Martian life. Now, at last, we could look for it. And when we found something that looked like us staring back, it felt like destiny fulfilled. It wasn't just an image, it was a confirmation of a story we'd been telling ourselves for generations. Mars has always stood out in the night sky, its red hue symbolizing both life and death, passion and destruction. Every culture has woven myths around it. The Roman god of war, the Egyptian Horus, the Hindu Mangala. Its color, its motion, its proximity, all of it seemed to demand meaning. So when science revealed the face, the world responded not as observers, but as participants in an unfolding cosmic myth. Psychologists suggest that Mars resonates so deeply with us because it feels like a parallel Earth, a planet that might have been. Its valleys once held rivers, its poles still contain ice, and its atmosphere hints at a lost climate. It's not hard to imagine that Mars once thrived, and that what we see now are the bones of a civilization long turned to dust. It's the story of ourselves reflected across time and distance. The allure of ancient Martians is not just scientific curiosity, it's existential. If life once flourished there, it means life is not a cosmic accident. It means intelligence may be a universal outcome, not a rare miracle. The ruins we imagine on Mars are symbols of continuity, proof that consciousness may arise, perish, and arise again across worlds. Even as evidence pointed to purely geological explanations, the fascination never waned, because ultimately Mars embodies humanity's oldest yearning, to find company in the void. The face and its surrounding pyramids were more than rocks. They were projections of our desire to belong to something greater than ourselves. And so, Mars remains our cosmic reflection, a reminder that when we search the stars for other civilizations, what we're truly searching for is the echo of our own. The cultural impact and legacy of the mystery. The face on Mars did more than inspire scientists and conspiracy theorists. It reshaped popular culture, embedding itself deep in the collective consciousness of the 20th century. The image, haunting and beautiful, became a symbol of mystery, hope, and the endless tension between belief and skepticism. It was no longer just a photograph, it was a story humanity couldn't stop telling. From the late 1970s onward, Cydonia appeared everywhere, in documentaries, comic books, movies, and even video games. In 1977, NASA's photograph of the face was printed in newspapers around the world, sparking a wave of curiosity that would ripple through decades. It became an icon of the unknown, an emblem of how little we truly understand about the cosmos. Hollywood soon took notice. Films like Mission to Mars 2000 and Total Recall 1990 drew directly from the imagery of the Cydonia region, imagining hidden cities and ancient artifacts buried beneath the Martian sands. Television shows such as The X-Files and Ancient Aliens turned the face on Mars into a recurring motif, a reminder that truth might still be out there, waiting to be uncovered. Artists and musicians found inspiration too. The face became a metaphor for mystery itself, the silent watcher in the void, the cosmic mirror of our own existence. It appeared on album covers, posters, and science fiction novels, its meaning evolving with each retelling. To some, it represented hope, to others, deception. But to all, it symbolized the intersection of science and mythology, where reason meets wonder. Even within academia, the face on Mars became a point of discussion in philosophy and cognitive science. Scholars debated whether the persistence of belief, even after debunking, revealed something profound about the human psyche. Perhaps they suggested we need mysteries like Cydonia, not for answers, but for the questions they keep alive. The image also influenced generations of scientists, many of whom admitted that their fascination with Mars began not with data, but with that photograph. It was proof that even in skepticism, there is inspiration. NASA itself acknowledged that the face on Mars, though misunderstood, helped maintain public interest in Martian exploration for decades. Curiosity, after all, is the fuel of discovery. As the years passed, the mystery transformed from controversy to legend. The face became a kind of cultural relic, not of Mars, but of humanity's relationship with the unknown. It reminded us that our quest for truth is as emotional as it is intellectual. Even when the mystery is solved, its shadow continues to inspire. Today, the image remains one of the most famous photographs ever taken by NASA, not because of what it reveals, but because of what it suggests. It tells us that belief and wonder are inseparable from discovery, that the cosmos will always hold room for imagination. The face on Mars endures not as a monument of stone, but as a monument of mind. And perhaps that is its greatest legacy. It showed us that exploration isn't just about finding answers in the stars, it's about finding meaning within ourselves. Conclusion: coincidence or evidence of something greater? For nearly half a century, the face on Mars has watched us, not from the surface of the red planet, but from the depths of our imagination.
It began as a photograph, a mere trick of light and shadow, yet it became something infinitely larger, a symbol of humanity's unending hunger for meaning. Whether carved by nature or by the hands of an ancient race, it has achieved what all great mysteries do. It has refused to die. Science tells us that the face is illusion, a product of erosion and the human mind's need for familiarity. Under new light, its features fade and the myth dissolves into stone.
And yet, even as we understand the mechanics of the illusion, a quiet unease lingers. Why did it feel so real? Why did it speak to something so deep within us? Perhaps because it was never really about Mars. It was about us. The face became a mirror reflecting our greatest questions. Are we alone? Have others walked this cosmic path before us? Each crater, ridge, and shadow whispered possibilities that reason alone could not silence. The more science tried to explain, the more the mystery seemed to expand, as though truth itself was inviting us to keep asking. Throughout history, every generation has had its own Cydonia, a mystery that blurs the line between knowledge and wonder. For our ancestors, it was the stars. For us, it was Mars. And for those who come after, it may be worlds we have yet to discover. What matters isn't whether the face is real. It's that it made us look up and wonder. Perhaps that's the true lesson hidden in the red sands. The universe doesn't whisper answers. It echoes our questions. It doesn't hide meaning. It invites us to create it. In every illusion, in every shadow mistaken for a sign, there is a story about the mind that imagined it. The face on Mars is not proof of life beyond Earth. It's proof of life within us. Even now, as rovers crawl across the Martian surface and orbiters map its every detail, the spirit of that first image endures. It reminds us that science and imagination are not opposites but companions, two sides of the same endless search for truth. Without mystery, science has no reason to begin. Without science, mystery has no way to grow. So perhaps the face on Mars is both coincidence and evidence. Not evidence of aliens, but of something far greater, the boundless curiosity that defines humanity. The need to look into the darkness and see a reflection staring back. The desire to find meaning, even in dust. And as long as there are stars above us and worlds yet unexplored, that face, whether illusion or monument, will remain silent, watching, waiting. A reminder that the universe is not empty. It's alive with questions, and we are still learning how to ask them.